Hello, my name is Rob Simpson and welcome to Directors Uncut. If this is your first episode, we put filmmakers from all corners of the globe onto a huge list that covers everything from superhero blockbusters to shot-on-video slashers. Then we turn it into a lottery of directors by using a random number generator to pick a name out of the hat, whatever name comes out. I am joined by a rotating cast of guest hosts to discuss them and their work through 2 films. Today I've been joined by Andrew, first time since the Fright Fest special. Hello there.
Hello. Yes, indeed.
That was a very, very long episode. Longest to date, I think.
We had over 70 movies to discuss at Fright Fest. Today I think we're discussing 2 movies, so we'll see if that solves that problem.
Yes. Returning for the first time since Hodorowski, Cliff. Hi there.
Hello. How's it going?
Not bad. This is a bit simpler to talk about, so that's a lot less stressful.
Yeah, I mean they are fairly fairly straightforward movies. I mean, they do what they say on the tin more than Hodorowski does. You don't have to really figure shit out so much. Quite straightforward.
Oh yes, definitely. And they're making their debut appearance on this part of the show, despite being on some "What Have You Been Watching" segments. Oliver, hello there.
Hi, yeah, excited to be here. It's good first director to go for, I think. So,
yes, it's just jump into it. It's Stanley Kubrick. Debate could be made that he's one of the sort of I don't know whether you'd agree with this, any of you 3, but if you're going to make a Mount Rushmore of legendary titans of cinema, he'd probably be there or thereabouts.
And here we are, 4 white men on that on a different Mount Rushmore, looking at him.
Well, thank you for deflating that.
You're quite right, though. He is a titan of cinema, and many people live in his shadow. So that is certainly the case.
Andrew, where was the first time you heard, or aware at least, of Kubrick?
You know what? It's just too long ago for me to remember. It's one of those people where you feel like you've just always heard of them, always been aware of them. I was pretty into horror from a young age, and I remember watching The Shining on TV. So I'm going to say The Shining. But then again, I also saw The Killing pretty early as well. I think that was possibly playing on the late lamented Moviedrome. So one of those 2, I'm going to guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was on Moviedrome. I think that's where I saw that. My first, I think, probably exposure to anything by him was the Full Metal Jacket posters that I saw at the station in '86. I didn't know who Kubrick was, though, because otherwise I would have gone, oh, that's the Kubrick one, not the Oliver Stone one or the whoever directed Hamburger Hill one. But there was that bunch of Vietnam movies that came out around the same time. I think probably The Shining was the first I would have seen, being a horror fan. And it was definitely on ITV when they showed the long cut, which was really hard to get hold of until DVD came out.
What's different about that long cut? I've not actually seen that.
About half an hour longer. I've never actually watched the shorter version, so I couldn't tell you exactly.
Oh, well, fair enough. Fair enough.
There's a lot of skeletons in it. That's all I can remember on the TV edit or whatever they call it. Lots of shots of skeletons sitting around.
Okay, so Oliver, yourself?
I think probably The Shining. My mum was a big fan of the film, and my whole family are really big on Stephen King. My auntie is a huge Stephen King reader, so I think probably watched The Shining when I was 16, 17 maybe, which was only 10 years ago, so maybe a bit fresher than some other people. But The Shining was definitely my first encounter, and then probably Clockwork Orange, because again, my mum really likes that film as well. So both of them.
My mum sounds cool.
Yeah, well, this is a side project. This is a very side-winded, but I'll do it quickly. I saw my mum at the weekend, and she started talking to me about Terrifier 2. I was like, have you seen that Terrifier 2 film? It's meant to be really good. And I was like, I don't know how many people's mums are talking to me about this extremely hyper-violent slasher. But there you go. So, but yeah, as I said, most of my knowledge of Stanley Kubrick started probably from, my mum. So.
Yeah, to be the dissenting voice a little bit. I think it was probably his last film for me, Eyes Wide Shut. Because it just, when you're aware of directors, I think it comes at different points in your film journey. And for me, it just a bit later.
So that was his first. He hadn't made anything between Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut, and that was like 13 years gap, wasn't it?
Yeah, was it 98 or so, Eyes Wide Shut?
I think.
Eyes Wide Shut, 99.
Yeah.
99. I remember because I bought a book. It was one of those Faber books that was, if it wasn't Kubrick on Kubrick, it was something like that. And I think there was stuff in it about his upcoming film. Like the final chapter was like, oh, his next film is Eyes Wide Shut. It turns out if I'd just waited to buy that book, I could have had his complete career all in one book. Because, of course, he died before the film even came out. So the next edition had the entire film in. But I've still got my first edition that kind of looks forward to Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad that it didn't pop up in these two, or it isn't going to pop up in these two episodes, Eyes Wide Shut, because it's got its fans, that one.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, it's really good.
And it's not been a long time since I've seen it.
I always think I like it, and then when I watch it, it feels draggy to me. But then within about 3 weeks of having seen it, I go back to liking it again. I like the more concise version in my head.
Yeah, I think it could be a lot weirder than it would. I don't know. I was expecting it to be like really crazy and dark and twisted, but I thought apart from like a few scenes, it was fairly normal. So I think it's one of those films' expectations versus what actually happens. It was one of those. I thought it was going to be this like really dark, disturbing film, but it's not, which is fine. It's not what it's supposed to be, but
aren't Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman in it? I think it's pretty weird for a movie with them in it.
I want to see the scrap scenes with Harvey Keitel because he filmed all his scenes, and then Kubrick decided he wanted to play the role a little differently, but Harvey Keitel wasn't available anymore because the shoot was taking months on months.
That isn't the story I read.
Oh, what story did you read?
I read that there was a scene where Harvey Keitel was walking through a doorway, and Stanley Kubrick was constantly asking him for a new take every time. He was just like did it like 100 times, and eventually Harvey Keitel stormed out and went, "You're fucking crazy, man! Fuck off!" and just like walked off set and never came back.
That does sound entirely possible, but I think it was the character that went on to be played by
Stanley Tucci,
Steve Pollack.
Yes. Yeah, the old guy, and the pool, the guy who plays Paul or something.
Yeah, and that pool scene is my favorite scene in the whole film. So if it took firing Harvey Keitel to get that scene that good, it was probably worth it.
But then think about how good it would have been with Harvey Keitel instead. That's just why I think. But.
We'll never know, or will we? Like maybe one day. One day we'll see.
Can you put it into Dali Mini? So the Eyes Wide Shut pool scene instead of Sidney Pollack.
Harvey Keitel as Victor Ziegler in Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, and see what it comes out with, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got two films tonight, and we have wildly different films. We've got A Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon, two very opposite ends of the spectrum of his work. So, which one do you two want to talk about first?
Well, I'll just say that although they're from different, you say they're from different ends of the spectrum, they are the only two films that he ever set in Britain.
So I think they're quite similar films, actually. I actually watched Barry Lyndon and realised they're actually very. If I was to pick two films out of his filmography that felt most similar, I would actually probably pick these two films. I think it's mainly because of the protagonist. They feel very Barry Lyndon and I can't remember the guy's name in Clockwork Orange. They feel quite similar in terms of like just kind of like psychopathic, but also likable and quite funny, but also kind of evil people.
One's the rise and fall of someone who seems vaguely but not entirely sociopathic, and the other one is the fall and rise of a delinquent psycho. So they're comparable, I think.
Let's get things nice and sparkling clear. This sarcasm, if I may call it such, does not become you, O my little brothers. As I am your Drugan leader, I'm entitled to know what goes on, eh? Now then, Dim, what does that great big horsey gape of a grin portend?
All right, no more picking on Dim, brother. That's part of the new way.
New way? What's this about a new way? There's been some very large talk behind my sleeping bag and no error.
Well, if you must have it then. We go around shop cresting and the like, coming out with a pitiful rooker full of money each. And there's Will the English and the Muscle Man Coffee Master saying he can fence anything that any male chick tries to crest. Yeah. The shiny stuff, the ice. The big money's available is what Will the English says.
Big money. Initiative comes to them that way. I've taught you much, my little droogies. Now tell me what you had in mind, Georgie boy.
I've got a very quick synopsis I wrote. Teenage hoodlum Alex DeLarge's violent rampages in a near-future London land him in prison, where he volunteers to an experimental form of aversion therapy with unexpected results.
Yes, it's as straightforward as it needs to be.
And what I really like about Clockwork Orange is that it's a long film, but it's divided into 3 equal parts: the crime part at the start, the prison bit in the middle, and then the rehabilitation or whatever it might be. God, I sound almost like NADSAT or whatever it might be. In the third, and they're all like, if you time them, they're all equally. What would it be? 47 minutes or something.
Give or take, yeah. I mean, it's a strange movie in the sense of it's kind of being boiled down to its greatest hits, and all the moments that you think this is Clockwork Orange, I think all take place in about the first hour.
Well, the first 4 or 5 scenes. I mean, what an opening! You've got the milk bar at the start, then you've got the beating the tramp in the tunnel, the bit in the theatre or the casino or whatever it is, and then the rape scene at home at the writer's house. All the first 4 scenes, you can see why it was such a shocker at the time. But like looking back now, once you get past that, it's very kind of I'm not saying gentle film, but there's that all the controversy comes in the first 4 scenes, really.
Yes, and it does slow down quite a bit after that. It goes to prison, and it can't really maintain that sort of pace, can it? As it starts, it needs to sort of knock Alex down a few pegs.
I mean, I just think it's a phenomenal film throughout. I wouldn't say that it ever loses pace or anything. I love it so much. I'm going to a word against Clockwork Orange.
I'm not saying a word against it. I think it's just like one of those movies that are very fast paced. Sometimes they just need to level things off a little bit. That's all I mean. But Andrew, Oliver, what are your feelings on Clockwork Orange?
I think Cliff is right to say it's divided into 3 parts, with the crime sequences, the prison, and then the kind of political rehabilitation angle. I'm maybe going to be a little bit controversial here and say that I think the first section, the first 45 minutes before he goes to prison, which probably, the aversion therapy scene aside, probably the most famous sequence in the film is that first 45 minutes. And I don't like it. I don't think it's very good.
I will not hear a word against it.
I like the rest of the film. I really like the aversion therapy stuff, the Ludovico technique stuff. But the first 45 minutes, I think Kubrick's love or his instinct towards those kind of very controlled, very locked down, sometimes described as clinical scenes, the kind of approach to shooting and framing and pacing and so on. I don't think it works for the material. In the book, you have all this use of NADSAT, the kind of future language which combines South London slang and Russian words and so on, and all of that acts as a kind of buffer to the audience. So they have to the readership. So they have to kind of pass through that and be like, what's he really talking about? Oh my God, he's talking about, raping people and bashing people's brains in, all that kind of stuff. So there's this kind of puzzle to it where you unpick the language and you're rewarded with a kind of horrific realization that, oh my God, this guy's up to just the most horrendous shit. But in the film, of course, he shows all that because it's a film. So you just kind of have to see a bunch of, rapes and murders and whatever it may be happening. And he has this alternative technique, which works very differently, of showing these very locked down shots, very controlled camera movements. trying to maybe dilute the horrificness with playing some ironic music and juxtaposing it and stuff like that. None of it works in the same way the use of language does in the book. And I don't, for me, it just doesn't achieve very much. You don't get a sense of real horror, or I didn't, because of the use of the distancing technique or the alienation effect or whatever you might want to call it. But at the same time, you're not really drawn into his world, because when he's charging around a building or threatening to kill someone or threatening to rape someone or driving his car around, none of it feels very exciting either. And if he's trying to force you into Alex's head, it should all feel like a tremendous rush, like you're all hopped up on the amphetamines they drink in their milk. But I don't feel that either. So I'm just kind of sitting there, and I'm more distracted by the use of camera movements than anything. I'm neither particularly horrified, because, I mean, maybe this is on me because I've seen a lot worse in other films, but I'm not kind of being forced into his head against my will and being, partaking in the excitement either, because I've seen a lot more exciting stuff in, action cinema over the years. And so I'm left wondering, how am I supposed to feel here? And what is Kubrick trying to achieve? Is he trying to put us, like, force us into Alex's side against our will? And then we go, no, what are you doing? No, I don't want to feel like this. Or does he want us to be horrified? What is going on? So that's my feeling about the first 45 minutes.
I could understand that if it wasn't for the fact it looks so amazing. The production design, the costumes, and the also not just how it looks, but the language. It's incredible to watch. That's what draws you in, surely.
I've seen a lot of good-looking films. If you're watching a film about a guy breaking into houses, raping people, stabbing his friends, smashing a tramp around the head and so on, and your takeaway is, oh, this production design is really on point, then maybe there is a point to that, but I'm not sure it's the point Kubrick intended.
Maybe it's because when I see it, I find it a very funny film. I think it works best as a black comedy.
No, that I do agree with, but I think it's the second and third kind of acts where that really works. It's just this first act that I don't think quite comes off, and that's what, to the extent I have a problem with the Clockwork Orange, that's my problem.
Oliver, you're going to prevent a fight or what here?
Well, I actually wrote about this his 50th anniversary in January. So, but I think the thing when I rewatched it for that, I do agree that the pacing is not that great. We're going back to what you said, Rob, about the kind of first section sort of really.
I wasn't saying that as a negative thing. I mean, you watch a lot of Asian stuff. I mean, it's paced all over the place, but you don't say it's badly paced. That's just the way it is.
No, but I do think that it does slow down, and I think that it sort of gets to points where I was a bit like, oh, come on, let's keep it moving. But I don't think the pacing is an issue that's like a showstopper or necessarily terrible. I just think it, that's if I had to say something I didn't like about it, it would be I think it's maybe a bit too long, and I think the pacing is a bit whatever. But I disagree that I actually think that Kubrick's style, very controlled and like specific and method and quite cold clinical filming style, works really well for this film and the violence, because it doesn't, like you mentioned, Rob, that you sort of he breaks into these houses and kills these people, but it doesn't feel like it's not a horror film. He's like filming it as if it was just like another Kubrick film, and I feel that kind of makes it a bit creepy in some ways and funny as well. And it's kind of this pretty good mix of like it's funny, but it's also kind of disturbing, and it's sort of Kubrick. Because he is so controlling of what you see and of how it basically has no emotional, well, very little emotional value. It's kind of like he's just showing you these horrible things happen and doesn't really give you any incentive to like feel sad or feel angry or upset. It's just like, here's some terrible people doing some terrible stuff. and I'm just going to film it as kind of simply as possible. And I quite like that. I think it works quite well. And I think that, the whole film's theme of like psychological control and this like violence that's kind of like within people is quite suited to Kubrick. So kind of, he's he's all about psychological control, like on set. So I also think Malcolm McDowell is amazing in this film, which I imagine most people would probably agree with that.
Well, I was going to say the way Andrew described that first act makes, if someone hadn't seen it, they'd probably be picturing quite a dour film where the camera's very still and it's all quite plain and everyone's a little bit mopey around, and you're not.
It's definitely not plain.
And Malcolm McDowell, I mean, for all of Kubrick's control, at the centre of it, like literally at the centre of the screen most of the time, you've got Malcolm McDowell shouting all his lines and saying ridiculous things. That bit, how art thou globby bottle of cheap stinking chip oil? It's so funny. It's like the juxtaposition between the control of the direction and him just like letting loose, being a fucking weirdo. It works so well for me. I've watched this countless times, and when I watched it again on Sunday, I just had the biggest grin on my face for the entire 2.25 hours. I love it so much.
Yeah, I think that I mean, I haven't seen every single Kubrick film, I won't lie, but out of the ones I've seen, I do think that Malcolm McDowell is sort of like, feels like the only one where Kubrick was like, "Oh, just do whatever the hell you want, like, just get on with it." Kind of like feels like he's just. I mean, it might be that Kubrick told him to act like that. It probably is like that, but he feels kind of different to a lot of other Kubrick main characters. Like you look at someone like Tom Cruise in Eyes Wide Shut, or well, I guess actually The Shining is also quite hectic and over the top. But I think in a sort of different way, the concept of that is he's gone mad, whereas Malcolm McDowell's character, from the very first scene you see him in, he's like just completely
he's
loose
like
cannon.
A prowling leopard throughout that first sequence for sure. A leopard in human form.
And Wendy Carlos's music as well. I mean,
oh yes, the music is so good.
Fucking hell! Like you can't see it. You can't picture that first shot of Malcolm McDowell staring at the camera without hearing that synth drone. Oh, it's so good. I just can gush over this film like forever. So, yeah.
Yeah, the language is such a weird thing, though, really, isn't it? I mean, you forget, if you've not seen it for a while at least, how infant-like it is, calling eggs eggy wags, steaky wakes. His dreams. There's a bit
where Dim says, "I do like I should do what you done." That's his kind of. I should fight back. I do what was it? I do like I should do what you done.
It's got a weird sort of
babyish.
Sort of contradictoriness to it, and that's not a word, but contradiction to it, where it's everybody speaks in sort of a very mannered and staged and intellectual way, but it has this baby language just dotted throughout it. It's just part of the world building, I think, and if anything, this does really, really well without sort of over embellishing. Really, it's just how it sets up the world and how it builds the world. Because we don't really know much about the world, just what we see through these characters. But places like the milk bar, I don't even know where that came from. That's such a unique idea. The prison system as well. It's just so
the milk bar is straight from the books. But
still, it's
okay. I've got a question for you. There's so much in this film, in that first section especially, that kind of throws sexual provocation in your face, including when he goes to the second home invasion, when he goes to the health spa woman's house. She's got all these big paintings with that highlight people's vulvas, and there's big ceramic penises around and everything. One gets an impression that this is trying to portray a society that's become very decadent, and the maybe the crime that we're seeing is one feature of that decadence, but it kind of is entwined with other suggestions of that. So I wonder, is this? In addition, he is violently groped by the teacher who comes to see why he's not at school.
Delta is so funny.
In a threatening way. Well, my question is this is this a reactionary film, and B, is this a homophobic film? Because when he goes to prison, there's also a couple of gay chaps in prison who, while he's up, turning the handle on the hymnal, karaoke thing, he has a couple of guys in the audience who are kind of puckering their lips at him, and he makes voiceover comment about them as well. So if this movie has a view of decadence, which is very sexual, and then it also has a number of kind of predatory homosexual characters, is it a reactionary movie in some way?
Last time I watched it, whilst I was watching it, I was kind of constantly thinking, I wonder, is this a conservative film or is this like a left-wing film? Or like, what is it trying to tell me? And I think that in some ways, I say that's kind of why I find it interesting. Because it's like, I don't know too much about Kubrick's politics, but I'm almost certain he wasn't left wing. I'm almost certain he was at least somewhat conservative in his life. But I think it's interesting that it has these, very towards the end of the film, sort of this dehumanization process. Alex has to basically submit himself to this, machine to be let loose, to be free. But then also, as you said, it has this kind of reactionary, anti-decadence. Look at what the '60s has done to society, sort of idea. This is all these paintings and all this sexual perversity is a result of the '60s and hippies and stuff. But I think it's interesting as a film because to me it feels very conflicted. It's almost like Stanley Kubrick's mind is all over the place politically, and he doesn't really have he isn't able to form a coherent ideology on the film. It's just kind of all over the place in terms of politics. So I think it's a bit of both. I would say it's kind of reactionary, but it also is saying some interesting things about prison and authority.
I think there's a line that's almost throwaway that is crucial, which is the reason they're introducing the Ludovico technique of a way to reduce the prison population is to free up space for political prisoners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know which. I can't remember what bits of the politics in the film come from the novel because I read it about 25 years ago. But obviously, a lot of the politics in it will be from the novel, and I don't think you can say that it's all down to Kubrick. I don't know. Andrew, you're obviously more familiar with the novel.
I read the novel about 5 times, but many, many years ago, and I haven't read it for a long time. The biggest difference between the novel and the film is that Kubrick, I think famously, I don't think this is apocryphal, I think this is confirmed. He read a version of the novel that didn't have the final chapter in it.
Yeah. It was published in America or something.
Yeah, published in America without the final chapter. Yeah. And the final chapter is, they try all this stuff on him, all this Ludovico technique and all this what's to be done about criminals and so on and so on. And then the final chapter is, anyway, I grew up and I just grew out of all that stuff and then I settled down.
Yeah.
And Kubrick, when he found out about the chapter partway into pre-production, allegedly said that he really didn't like that chapter and that he was going to be ignoring it, which is has a very big impact, I think, on the book and film's respective politics.
Yes.
But would you say the book is more reactionary or less reactionary because of the chapter missing?
The book, it's hard for me to extract the book from its author because Anthony Burgess could be a very, very reactionary writer. He wrote 1985, which is kind of his version of 1984 maybe, or riffing on the title of 1984. But in 1985, London has been taken over by oil sheik money and trade unionists, and it's a nightmare because the trade unionists and the Arabs have taken over, and that's really awful. And that is a very reactionary book. So is A Clockwork Orange itself reactionary? I think, like most great art, it's ambiguous. Is that the right word? It gives you enough scope to fill in the gaps with your own ideas and come to your own conclusions. It gives you enough scope to do that. And as a result, no, I wouldn't say it's reactionary. But But it's a great book.
I guess the ending is libertarian, but the whole thing is also anti-authoritarian, whereas in today's society, the libertarians tend to like authoritarianism. So I think politics over the years has changed to the point where calling it one thing or another isn't really comparable to what those political terms mean now.
I don't think you can put. I would agree that you can't put the book or the film into a tight little bucket like that. But when I watch the film, I'm very mindful of those portrayals of gay people, which do seem a bit off, to say the least, to my eye, and also the very sexualized art, which seems to be. It's just it kind of rubs me up the wrong way in that it seems to suggest being relaxed about, like, being open to sex, or being, in today's terminology, being sex positive is a symptom of decadence, and part of a piece with Alex breaking into your house and killing you. So that raises an eyebrow from me. But I think the politics are slippery and interesting enough that it doesn't just clunk down on one end or the other of a political compass.
Hello.
So,
yeah,
Can you hear you now?
Yeah. Oh, good. This is going to be fun to edit.
Can you hear me now?
So, any sort of closing thoughts on Clockwork Orange? I mean, for me personally, just a thought came through my head that it feels like it's of a thematic piece with Battle Royale in its worldview, of its view of youth in particular.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Did you know that Ken Russell was originally slated to direct it, but the BBFC objected to the idea, and so that's why Ken Russell didn't direct it?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine what he'd do with it. That'd be fun.
But it's quite similar. It's not dissimilar to The Devils, thematically and stylistically.
Interesting.
Not seen The Devils, very hard to get hold of.
If you think of like the way The Devils will suddenly cut to the scenes of great decadence with the king or whatever it is, the prince, the dauphin, it is very similar, I think. And the fact that they both came out in 1971 is madness, really. What a year! What a year for weird British films.
One other thing to say, of course, this is the film that gave the pop group Heaven 17 its name. Although in the film, they're described as the Heaven 17, which suggested that, and Moloko. And
I noticed another one.
The band name The Heaven 17 suggests that in the film there are 17 people in the band, which is not the case for the real life Heaven 17.
No.
The one other thing I would say is that I was in the auditorium where they performed the famous Ludovico technique on Sunday. If anyone wants to go, it's Screen 1 at the Picture House in West Norwood. So, pop by to the West Norwood Picture House and go to Screen 1, and there's a little plaque by the door announcing that this is where they brainwashed Alex Delage. So go check it out.
I can't believe we haven't talked about Deltoid properly, or Michael Bates as the prison governor, the prison officer guy who obviously seems to think he's a sergeant major in the army. And
I mean,
shut your filthy mouth, you scum, and things like that. And
that just gives it away that it's comedic as well. His character, he can't not be a comedic character. And
P&M, Alex's Tar and Ma, they're so funny.
I went to the exhibition of production design for Stanley Kubrick, and they had the kind of little screening booths where you'd go in with 10 other people and watch a particular scene. And I went into one, and it was the prison intake scene, and there was a guy in there like having a little bit of a cry and like wiping tears out of his eyes, and people were like, "Are you okay?" And he was looking at his name, Michael Bates.
Yeah,
he was looking at Michael Bates, and he just said, "Oh, that's my dad." And everyone was like, "Oh, that's really sweet." He's like, "Yeah, he's not with us anymore," and it's just so nice to come by and see him. And he's there so up on screen, just going like, "Get behind the line!"
He's so good at it. The bit of I could talk about so many scenes in this film, but there's that bit where he's doing the transfer of Alex from the prison into the clinic, and the camera's just looking at him as he's like doing all this stuff with the clipboard, getting the doctor to sign forms in triplicate, tearing him carefully at the perforations, like sort of licking and handing it over. And it's like, it should be the most boring thing to watch, and it's so funny.
Oh, I was just going to say one last thing is that I find it infinitely fascinating that this is the film that Stanley Kubrick followed 2001: A Space Odyssey up with. I can imagine at the time people who were adults at the time watching 2001: A Space Odyssey when it came out, and then waiting for his next film, and then having this must have been a pretty weird shock, because they really couldn't be. Well, I mean, I'm sure someone can find similarities between the two, but from a
the flats alone, the sort of modernist design of the flats feels very much like the space station.
Yes, production design,
in 2001.
absolutely. But in terms of like plot and themes and just everything about it, I feel like it's much more shocking, and just think it's a very interesting follow up.
You can see the 2001 soundtrack album on display in the record shop in a Clockwork Orange.
It does feel very informed by British culture and British TV. It feels like the film of someone who's been watching a lot of British TV in a way that 2001, strangely enough, does not.
He moved. Did he live?
Yeah, he made all his films from 1962 onwards, from Lolita onwards in Britain.
Was he living in the UK at this point?
Yes,
I think he moved, didn't he?
No. He moved to Britain in the early 60s and never left, really. He didn't like flying.
Oh, right. So I think he moved there a lot sooner. I thought he moved there for this, but obviously, I guess not. 겁나 무섭지라.
무섭긴 무엇이. 여하튼 요즘 이런 소문이 돌더라고. 그것을 누가 해준 얘긴데? 뱅뱅님. 아따 그 새끼 그 진짜 이제 너한테 가장 떠들어 쌌네. 이?
Yes. So from that, we will pick who is coming on an upcoming episode. So between 1 and number, how many is there? 459 directors, which is a lot of people.
Yes, it is.
We are picking number 159. So going from the top to the middle somewhere, it is Hong Jin-na, which is one of these Korean names where if you see it on a page, it means nothing. And when you Google it, you think, oh, it's him. So
exactly.
That
was kind of my response to it.
Hong Jin-na is the director of The Wailing, The Chaser,
film.
The Yellow Sea, and last year, I think it was, or was it the year before? No, it was last year. He wrote and produced The Medium, the Thai found
I did not see that. I've seen all of his films except that. Well,
you've seen all of his films, but The Wailing, which I think is a modern masterpiece.
It's fantastic.
The Chaser, which The Chaser fell in a weird. I think Korean cinema had like its opening salvo of Park Chan-wook, Kim Ji-woon, and Bong Joon-ho, who superstars, rock stars of directors. They got sort of called away to America, and there was like this little period where nothing was really happening. And then that movie came out of that era. The Chaser came out of that era, and The Chaser, I don't know if you've seen it, but
oh yes,
it leaves an impression.
It's kind of like when somebody just punches you in the stomach. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah, it's not for the weak stomached either.
No, it's not.
It's because I think Korean cinema also got labelled with this sort of stereotype as well, that they only do serial killer or revenge thrillers, which is semi-fair.
I've had a little bit of a different experience over here just because their music and their dramas are so popular in the States. Mm. So I was watching what I like to watch, which is crime thrillers.
Yes.
But I was aware there was a much broader world out there of Korean cinema.
Yeah, and he's basically, I mean, I'm not saying The Yellow Sea, but as far as The Wailing and The Chaser goes, he is 100% hit rate.
Yeah, he's The Yellow Sea was fantastic, but it's very bleak.
Yeah, I can imagine that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's more in line with The Chaser. The Wailing was a little bit of a different film than those two.
Yeah, it's The Wailing's sort of folk horror, I'd guess.
Yeah, that's the best way I could put it.
Exorcism, Korean folk horror, which is it's 3 hours long, and that's always a hard sell for a lot of people. But I think it packs so much in there.
It's the time sails by.
It's one of my favourite films from the past 10 years. So if I have any excuse to watch that again, it's great.
Yeah.
Mr. Redmond Barry. The last occasion on which we met, you wantonly caused me injury and dishonor in such a manner and to such an extent as to which no gentleman can willingly suffer without demanding satisfaction, however much time intervenes. I have now come to claim that satisfaction.
Moving to movie 2 of the night, Barry Lyndon. But yes, this is a very widely different movie. It's a period piece, which outside of the World War movies he did, this is the only real true period piece. I mean, you could make the case that The Killing and all the noir are period pieces, but it was era.
Paths of Glory.
I'm not saying that. Yeah, I forget that one.
It's a war movie.
But,
apart from the war movies.
Yeah.
And also you could say Barry Lyndon's a war movie.
It has a large swathe of war in it, but very different type of war. A terrible war where you fire one pistol at a time, or one bullet at a time. So it plays very, very differently.
Eyes Wide Shut should have been a period piece because the sexual politics don't make sense in 1999. But that was yet another Kubrick era. Come on, Stanley, what are you thinking? I think it was Kirk Douglas who, when interviewed about Eyes Wide Shut, said he hated it, and when he was asked why he hated it, he just shrugged and said, "You should go to a hooker."
Did everyone else in the cinema stand up and go, "I hated it. I hated it"?
Hey,
yes. So, what are our feelings on Barry Lyndon?
It's really good.
Brilliant. My favourite.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too.
I think we got to pounce on that. Favourite Kubrick, please divulge more. That's an outlier of an opinion.
It's just I started the first time I saw this. It was round my grand's house, and I turned it on, and my understanding of Barry Lyndon was that it was the shit one. To put it bluntly, that was the reputation at the time. Barry Lyndon, it's the shit one.
It's really
really
one no
boring.
one talked about.
Yeah, and I remember, was it maybe my parents had said that or someone had said that, but around the same time, people always used to say that On Her Majesty's Secret Service was the shit James Bond film, and we all know that they are wildly incorrect about that, and they were wildly incorrect about this as well, because I turned it on, I didn't know what it was, turns out it was about 20 minutes in, and I just started watching it because I had nothing better to do, and I was transfixed right through to the end. And as soon as I could get my hands on a copy to watch it again from the beginning, I did. I didn't even work out what it was for about 10 or 15 minutes. I was like, oh, it's Barry Lyndon, which I've never seen. But this film is just, for my money, throwaway 2001. This is Stanley Kubrick's big meaning of life movie. This is his, what's the point of life? What do you want to get out of life movie? And it just follows this guy who's just absolutely determined to make something of himself via whatever means necessary, by playing the system as best he can, by playing the cards he's been dealt as best he can. And it's a great tragedy because he has a tragic flaw in him that means he gets everything he wants and then he fucks it all up and loses everything And then just when you think that that's a great story in itself, Stanley Kubrick hits you with this end card at the end that says basically, well, whatever you made of this story, it doesn't matter.
They're all dead now.
All fucking dead. So who gives a shit? Which I think is like the best end card that in the whole of cinema. That I always laugh when that comes up. If I had to pick a scene, 2 scenes, I think the real core of the movie is the relationship between him and his stepson, between Barry Lyndon and his stepson.
Definitely.
The scene where he just the back of every scene where they're facing off against each other is incredible. Building up to the duel. The duel is one of the greatest scenes again in all of cinema to my mind.
Right.
I think it's between that and the duel scene and The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, my 2 favorite duel scenes in all of cinema. It's just, you cannot tear your eyes away from the screen, and the performances are utterly on point. You feel for both people who are trapped in this standoff against each other by dint of the flaws they have in their own personalities, their utter refusal to back down, their utter refusal to kind of think constructively and de-escalate the situation. They just absolutely take each other out. It's such a not cynical picture. It's such a melancholy picture in that way, because it's not cynical because it really does feel for them, and they could have worked it out. They could have had it all, but they were both too pig stubborn and pig ignorant to recognize the situation. And if they'd only done that, they could have beaten the system, or Barry Lyndon could have beaten the system, but he just didn't have it within him. What a shame. But anyway, he's fucking dead, so who cares?
Seems like a universal appraisal of this one, though. Like, you all love it, because this is the first time for me, so this is a surprising consensus.
It's actually the first time for me as well, but I loved it so much that I think it's definitely my favourite. I've been meaning to watch this film for years, but I just hadn't. So this is a good excuse to go watch it. I think this film is interesting that, you know, Stanley Kubrick is often considered a very cold, clinical director, not really interested in like emotion, like melodrama or emotions. But I think this is a very sad, very sad film, as Andrew said, melancholic film. And I think it's you mentioned the relationship with him and his stepson, but I think that's important. But the relationship with his real son is really crucial for this film, because it's so like that, you know, that's where so much of the emotional weight comes from. And I don't know, maybe some of you have seen AI by Steven Spielberg, which is the script that Stanley Kubrick had written about the boy who is a machine. And it kind of, I always just think, why did Stanley Kubrick write this weird film about this boy who's a robot, and is a very sad film? But this made me realize so much. This felt very similar. This kind of idea of childhood and fatherhood, and like are we allowed to are we doing spoilers on this?
Not that spoiler, because that's a pretty big one. Right. I think a lot of people haven't seen this. It is
but the relationship between those two is very moving, and I think that is a really an element that is often not in other Stanley Kubrick films, that I think makes this film stand out so much. And I also really like how it's in sort of 2 parts. It feels like almost like a play of it's also fucking long. It's like 3 hours long. So, but it doesn't feel very long. It doesn't feel like you're watching a film for 3 hours. It goes through very quickly, and then of course there's the whole candlelight film, all lit by candlelight, and filmed on those NASA lenses, and it's just the whole thing looks like a painting. So I think that's sort of the very painted.
I thought this was quite slow, if I'm honest.
Did you like it?
I don't know. I don't think it's a movie that can really come to that conclusion. I mean, I know Oliver has, but personally, I don't think I can come to that conclusion after one viewing, because it's just a lot to process, really.
I liked it from the very first time I saw it. I guess I see new things in it each time I watch it. I really noticed that it announces again. Kubrick's humour shines through. People say that Doctor Strangelove was his only comedy, but no, Clockwork Orange is hilarious. Barry Lyndon is very funny. It's like the very first shot is that kind of long shot over like a landscape, and the narrator's saying what a great man Barry Lyndon's dad was, what a marvelous family he had, and then or at least he would have been if he hadn't been shot in a duel, and then you see like his dad just collapsing and dying. It's very Python-esque. So it's interesting, Andrew, that you called it it's his meaning of life story. I immediately tried to think of parallels with Monty Python's meaning of life, and I got as far as there is the bit where the guy's sick in the duel.
There is that. Yeah. Leonard Roster in this is hilarious.
Yeah,
like walking up and down like a little popinjay with his grimacing and so on, and it's a very almost vaudevillian performance. It's not quite that broad. It's drawn in a bit, but he's sort of like flaring his nostrils and sneering, and he's giving it all of that. It's just physically a very funny performance from Leonard Roster.
I mean, I find it very strange that I enjoy this film so much because I really don't like period dramas. And it's so controlled, it almost sort of defies you to find it exciting. But I think Michael Haldren's narration is so important to just like ease you into it. It makes it's like really comforting. It makes it feel like he's telling you a nice story. And it's just so easy to watch. And I know the critics at the time, they called it like slow and detached and unexciting. But I say yes, and so what? Not all films have to be James Wan's Fast and Furious 9. I don't know if that is being in this episode, that mention. Is that a callback to something that's in a different episode? I don't know.
Cut forward to the future. There we go.
It's not exciting as such, but it's never boring. It's really, really
good. I mean, I wouldn't say this. I would say it depends on what you find exciting, doesn't it? But I think I've seen French films that go on for 4 hours and they're just about people painting. For me, I didn't think this was even that slow. I mean, I've definitely seen far slower films than this one. I thought it was pretty. I mean, one scene I thought particularly was very funny was the and engaging was one of the war scenes, and where they're all kind of like they're marching towards the French. And the French are just shooting at them. And these soldiers, they just keep walking. They're all just getting shot and falling down. And there's no one's trying to run away or hide. They're just like walking into this like French army who are shooting them. I just found it so there's so many people, so many characters, and just like so well filmed. And I thought it was kind of funny. It's like just like no one's doing anything. They're just walking. This is how war was back then,
isn't it? It's intention. Is the intentionally poking fun at the absurdity of war, which he did quite a few times.
I would love to see a modern day adaptation of this in modern dress, in some sort of urban setting, but essentially the same script. And I think it could be like a brilliant kind of nil by mouth type bit of British misery porn. I think the fact that it's all in fancy pants costumes and looks super prestigious, I think tricks you into thinking it's just one of those period dramas that's quite boring, and it's really not. People should give it a chance.
The class relationships are pretty much the same then as they are now, so it is kind of timeless to that extent. Yeah, to that extent.
Yeah, I think the kind of this, I wouldn't. I mean, this is a period drama with quotation marks around it, but it's not a period drama in some ways. It doesn't feel like many other period dramas.
I watched that adaptation of Emma recently with Mia Goth and Anya Taylor-Joy, and I mean they're brilliant in it, and it's really nicely made. But it's hard to really care because the social morals, which is the whole point of the story, are just so dated, and it's hard to. It's just like, just say it. Just say you want to shag them, or whatever. And I don't really think there's any of that here. I think the emotions in this are quite modern and.
I think it.
That's the end of my sentence.
No, it doesn't.
Sometimes I end a sentence with "and."
It doesn't feel like a sort of another period drama I really really like is The Age of Innocence by Martin Scorsese, which is very classical, very doomed romances. People can't have divorces, or people can't free love isn't really a thing and blah blah blah. But that isn't, as you said, that isn't really the point of this film. Most period dramas are romance films, and there is some romance to this to do. Well, not most of them, but I think you could argue that a lot of period dramas have they're very romantic film. Well, they try to be romantic.
Well, it's melodramatic more than romantic, but yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, melodrama is romance, I guess, in some ways. Well, depends on the way you look at it, I guess. But this isn't very melodramatic either, apart from some points towards the final 30 minutes or whatever.
It's very matter of fact, even in its big sort of dramatic moments. It's not played out a moment like that perhaps will be in another movie. The big spoiler moment in particular is so devastating because it's just it just happens.
Yeah.
And that's how life is. And it just really hits hard up because of that, I think.
There's also no irony really at all, which, the comedy isn't like, we're making a period drama that's like not really, it's not self-aware and it's not ironic, and I like that sort of,
it's not David Copperfield, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like
I think
it's funny because I don't know. It's funny because of the performances, and it has this physical comedy, as you mentioned, like with I can't remember the actor's name. We were just talking about Leonard Rossiter, yeah, and also I don't know who plays the stepson, or the sort of teen actor, but they're very like physically funny, like with a duel when he like throws up or he like does stuff like that. It's funny because of that. It's not funny because it's not trying to take itself serious. It's quite it's like it takes itself very seriously, but it's funny, and also, as you said, quite matter of fact about what you see. So I like that.
Yeah.
But the guy who plays the stepson is Leon Vitali, who went on to be Stanley Kubrick's basically right-hand man on all his subsequent films.
Oh, the one that died recently.
Yeah, the one that the documentary Film Worker was made about, and gave up his acting career to do that, with the exception that he does turn up in Eyes Wide Shut as the kind of, I think, as the master of ceremonies behind a mask.
Yeah, he does. I just look.
So he does play that role. But I've got a question. Back when the conventional wisdom was that this was one of Stanley Kubrick's worst films, maybe his worst film, the two charges that were leveled at it were, one, it's very slow and boring, and we've kind of covered that point, but the other charge was that Ryan O'Neal is just a very, very blank, bad actor, and he can't handle this role. It's just not good enough.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear what
he
your thoughts are on that.
He is that, but I think it works with the character.
He's not a bad actor. I mean, between this and Paper Moon, he reveals himself as a very, very good actor, I think. But
I mean, I disagree. I've not seen Paper Moon, but I do think he's right. It's not that he lets down Barry Lyndon as a film, because part of me thinks maybe it was great casting to have someone like that. Now, do you know Brian De Palma's Body Double?
Yes.
And you know how bad Craig Wasson is in that as the lead?
Yes.
But he's perfect in it. He's an awful actor.
Yes.
And yet he's the perfect actor to play that character. And I think Ryan O'Neal is similar in Barry Lyndon. He's not very good, but it's perfect because he's such a...
he's aloof. His character is like just like fumbling around accidentally, having all these good things happen to him, and it almost feels like he's accidentally acting at the same time. Like he doesn't really know what he's doing in the role, and it works because his character doesn't really know what he's doing. That's just kind of how it.
I think he has the right kind of blankness for a role in which he's supposed to be kind of sympathetic, but also vaguely sociopathic. But not so sociopathic as to lose the audience's sympathy. And I think his inner blankness really works well. And the inner blankness allows you to project what you want to see onto him, which is perfect for the film and perfect for the ending of the film as well.
And the
ending is, well, what was the point? At the end of the day, what was the point of all that? And his blankness really works with that message.
I think you can't really fake being blank behind the eyes. I mean, I don't think Fern Cotton's faked her entire career. I think she's genuinely dead behind the eyes. I think Ryan O'Neal might be too.
Any closing thoughts for Barry Lyndon? Anything else that we haven't mentioned or touched upon?
If you haven't seen Barry Lyndon, go see it.
Yeah,
that's my recommendation.
I was reading the Wikipedia page for this, and when I watched it, and I noticed this interesting thing that was briefly mentioned. I didn't have time to really go into it. There are a few links to references. Maybe there's more information, but it says the production had problems related to logistics, weather, and politics. Kubrick feared that he might be an IRA hostage target, which I think is very interesting. It's a very interesting statement that I haven't really investigated, but I don't know if anyone knows anything about that.
Shergar of his era.
I would say that Saraband, the handle piece that opens it, is an absolute classical banger.
Yes. Just the music again throughout is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, his use of classical music is very strange. It almost brings a sense of danger to the sort of music that he's putting in it, and I don't think anybody else uses classical music in the same way that he does. It's kind of hard to pinpoint, hard to characterize, really, but
he picks the more doom-laden classical pieces, doesn't he?
Yeah. Yes,
the music is very good, I think, in this. It's just a great score. I mean, there's not really it comes in at the right times. I think it's I think it's just one of those films where it has great sound, great production. I think as I mentioned, I love the candlelight. How it's all uses just it's only candlelight. There's no artificial lighting. I think that I was actually speaking to my family at the weekend because my family were all shocked to hear that I liked period films, which I don't know where they got the idea that I didn't like them. But I said that I watched Barry Lyndon and mentioned the candlelight thing, and a few of my family members said that there was a few TV shows over the past 10 years that have done that, BBC ones, that have done that candlelight thing. And I had never thought that maybe it was used in other places. I've just always known this is the film that kind of, just has candlelight and no other lights. But it's a very effective, it's never, despite the fact it doesn't have any artificial lights, you can see everything. There's never a frame where you're like, I don't know what's going on here because it's too dark. When there is darkness, I feel like it is there for a reason. And I think that, obviously Stanley Kubrick probably spent like 12 hours a day setting up these candles because that's the kind of guy he was. But I just love the atmosphere and lighting as well.
Well, those shows, I imagine there is lots of shows lit by candlelight only. There was I think it was a Shudder movie that was the same too, but I think the difference there and the difference here is Kubrick's history was he started his career as a photographer, so he values things like this, whereas maybe other people don't quite have that same sort of dedication to.
What Shudder film was that?
I can't remember recently.
You know what? I'm just trying to think of something I watched recently that had that similar kind of lighting, and it's just it's escaping me.
It was a period one about two girls who fall in love, and the very puritanical village tries to sort of snuff them out.
Oh, Fear Street 1666.
Not that one.
It's not. It's not.
Although there is a connection with the bad Irish accents, but
Was it The Last Thing Mary Saw?
That sounds right, yeah.
Maybe.
It's a very different vibe as how the candlelight cinematography comes together. This is beautiful, whereas that's very, very dark. And
on purpose, though, or just because they don't know how to light it?
Well, I won't throw them under the bus.
with all that candlelight cinematography going on as well, of course, he's incredibly controlling his shots, and yet I never really feel him standing behind the camera, which is great because that's exactly the feeling I get from A Clockwork Orange, where I can really feel him moving the camera. I never feel that at all in Barry Lyndon, despite the fact that everything must be so incredibly controlled to get those shots to work. So I think that's another sign of its greatness.
You don't have to go under the knife to achieve perfection. Just use Arlo Glow.
It's that glow.
Transform yourself from ugly duckling to stunning swan for just $199.99. Call the number on your screen now.
Get that glow.
Arlo Glow is the only skincare product that transforms your body, mind, and soul.
To place an order, call now.
Arlo Glow's groundbreaking, patented 6-ingredient formula taps into the genius of nature's finest and most luxurious resources: diamonds, gold, and caviar. Harnessing the power of retinol and peptides that work deep within the dermal layer, promoting new skin, fresh cells, and cell production. Arlo Glow literally tells your body to make a new you. Let it work its magic.
Side effects may include loss of appetite, vomiting, headache, nausea, diarrhea, dizziness, and drowsiness. Migraines are common in women ages 65 and up. If skin irritation appears, blood in the stool, and/or urine is visible, please discontinue use and consult your physician immediately.
Call the number on your screen now.
Supplies are limited.
Okay, so that leads us to the final part of the show in which we talk about the other things that we have been watching, movies, TV, whatever. Who wants to jump in first?
Choose.
Yeah,
Okay, I'll go in first because I've not got a lot. It's two things really. At the time of going to press, I think it's all up now, but Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. Saw the first 5. Lot 38.
It's Lot 36. I've seen all of these as well. I thought Lot 36 was the weakest, but I really like some of the others.
Lot 36, it feels like they sort of padded it out a little bit too much. Graveyard Rats, which is my favourite, Vincenzo Natali. Don't watch that if you've got any sort of problems with claustrophobia or rats. And The Autopsy, which is the David Pryor one, which I struggled with, but I'm kind of like that with violence or gore, which is very much based in reality, and that is based around autopsies, as the title suggests. The Outside, which is very, very bold. I never remember her name. Anna Lily Anampur, who did The Girl Walks Alone at the Night, which is about sort of a yogurt-style stuff, which makes people beautiful, and it's got some great turns in that. And The Pickman's Model, which is, as ever with H.P. Lovecraft adaptations, I think it kind of misses the point. It's
which one was that? Sorry.
Le Pickman's Model. It's
because there's another H.P. Lovecraft adaptation as well, isn't there, in the series? Dreams in the Witch's House.
Yeah, Dreams in the Witch's House.
Which has already been adapted once, I think, by Stuart Gordon, but I don't know how.
I think H.P. Lovecraft is better when you're being a little bit more liberal with the adaptation. In the case of The Pickman's Model, it's a bit too literal, it's a bit too dull, I'd go as far to say.
Good ending, though.
And the other thing was, with the Satan Slave 2 being on Shudder, I haven't seen any Joko Anwar, so I started with Satan Slaves 1, which I'm not sure what really to expect, really. It's both a sequel and a remake. Not a prequel and a remake, I heard. It's interesting, really, because it sets up this great idea of what happens to a family when somebody they've been caring for suddenly dies. Doesn't really pick up on that with any great sort of substance. But it builds to this very, very interesting idea, sort of a folklore version of The Omen. Like very, very much where it goes. And the final act really does kick off in some really satisfying ways. The use of zombies in a way which isn't, they're just there to eat people, which I think is really satisfying in a different sort of version of those creatures, which I think horror could really do with right now. But if I didn't know there was a sequel, there's a scene at the end where it's 1 year later. If I didn't know there was a sequel, I find that rather grating. But otherwise, I think it's a great piece of horror. Bit ploddy in the middle, but a great piece of horror.
Oh, I didn't realise we were doing TV, but I might as well mention one of the a rare TV series that I made it all the way through, because I'm very bad at just giving up after 5 minutes or an episode or whatever. But Jungle on Prime Video, which is a sort of a near future dystopian UK drill drama with musical bits. There's like occasionally the characters will break out into rap. Charting, well, it's a 6 episode thing, but it's 2-3 episode stories really. They charts. The first 3 episodes chart a guy trying to avenge his brother's death, and the second half is a different guy trying to stop his little brother from leading falling into a life of crime. It's one of the most beautiful looking pieces of TV I've ever seen. Like, you remember how amazing Utopia looked, the Channel 4 thing? This is up there with that, but even just better. It's incredible to look at. And the thing is, it's just so cool. You feel cool watching it. It's just wicked. And if I've got one complaint about it, it's the last 20 minutes are quite what's the word? Sugary. What's the word? Sentimental. They're a bit too sentimental for my tastes. But no, it's great. It's just amazing to look at. It's got little cameos by like Dizzy Rascal and IMDb and Big Nasty. and Gigs. So they all, and Tony Temper, they all do, they all get little songs. I say songs, it's basically arguments in rap style. It's so cool. It's very, very good. And at the opposite end of cool, I got around to watching Bill and Ted Face the Music, which not that there's anything wrong with the idea of doing a third Bill and Ted movie, just not in 2022. Not in 2022 because Keanu Reeves looks tired. And I know he's an action hero now, and that's what I really don't understand. Because he does John Wick, which I've not seen any of those films, but I don't understand how someone who's an action hero, and by all accounts quite a kinetic one, looks so tired playing Ted again. It's painful to watch. And the
giving him a shave, it just looks like a complete. He does look ill.
Yeah,
really.
And the script is so fucking first draft. It's just rehashing everything from Excellent Adventure again, but in a much less interesting way. They've tried to do something with their teenage daughters that doesn't really work because they don't get enough time. Maybe if it was just about them, it might work better. But even then, the Samara Weaving plays plays Bill's son, and is it the other way around? Hang on, Thea and Billy. So there's Samara Weaving as one of them, and she's Bill's son, and someone called Bridget Lundy Payne plays Ted's. So I say son, plays daughters. Daughters, obviously. Samara Weaving plays Bill's daughter. Bridget Lundy Payne plays Ted's daughter. There we go, got that. But Samara Weaving makes absolutely no effort to do a Alex Winter impression, and Bridget Lundy Payne makes way too much effort to do a Keanu Reeves impression. It's really unbalanced, and it's painful to watch, and it's so boring, and I hated it.
Okay, a pick up from that maybe.
Some things I watched recently, I finally saw Barbarian, which I think I've already seen. I know Rob's already seen that because I saw him log it on Letterboxd. But I saw it at the cinema Sunday. I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't totally in love with it. But I didn't hate it, which is enough. I'm not. Lots of people talk about modern horror being very good now at the minute, but I'm not entirely convinced myself. But I didn't think this was. I thought this was pretty decent. Although I liked the first half a lot more than I liked the second half.
Yeah, just leave it at that because it is one of those movies.
I won't go into spoilers or anything. But I did think that it was a bit all over the place, and but it looked great, and it did remind me. No spoilers, but I did get a lot of Toby Hooper vibes from it, which I can always appreciate because and it was funny at times as well, and I thought
it's very funny, yeah. Best use of the tape measure in horror.
It's a good scene, yeah.
Yes, yeah, that scene specifically was probably my favorite actually. But yeah, I think it is interesting as a film, as you said, that talking about it really at all actually could spoil it. And I actually I wasn't trying to purposely avoid knowing anything because I'm not particularly too bothered if a film gets spoiled me before I've seen it. But even my friend saw the trailer for it. I went with my friend, and he came out of the film being like 85% of that film wasn't even in the trailer. So they obviously did a very good job of keeping most of the film hidden from the viewers, which is interesting. Most film trailers nowadays spoil the film. So it was good that they managed to sort of create a good trailer. So that was that, which I thought was okay.
I do think the bit where it feels like, wow, that's the end of the film, sounds like the end credits are about to roll, and we're hardly into it at all. I thought that was one of the finest moments of the film.
I like that bit before. I like the bit before that quite a lot, but the bit after that I wasn't huge into. But I did appreciate the sort of jarring switch.
Yeah.
I thought that was a very interesting decision. But
I'm a big fan of it just on the premise that it's a fun horror movie, and there just isn't that many of them these days. They're all a little bit.
No, that's where the Hooper comparison comes in from. I think that idea that Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, Funhouse, they're all Eaten Alive. They're all a bit fun, schlocky.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is funny as well. I mean,
exactly.
I don't think that we've not seen it recently.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, all his films are all quite funny, which I thought. Actually, I kind of kind of reminded me a bit of that. But then on the other side of funny, I watched last night. I watched a James Gray film, Two Lovers, with Joaquin Phoenix, who is a director I actually really like. He has a lot. He's an interesting director in my opinion because he makes films that if you just looked at them from Google Images, you would think they were like Oscar sort of bait films, maybe. But he actually has never really had any Oscar credit at all. But then he's also kind of not really like an artsy director. He kind of has this he sits in this very weird abyss, which is like too artsy for like mainstream Oscar winning films, but then also not artsy enough for like to be an art house director, and just kind of sits in this middle ground.
He makes a super artsy space travel movie, and then halfway through there's just a killer monkey.
I actually haven't seen that one yet, so I will need to watch that one.
Spoilers for that film. There's a killer monkey, so get on it.
Yeah, but this film was, I've seen some of his other films which were more kind of crime, related, but this was, this is a melodrama romance film set in modern day, well, modern for when it was made, Brooklyn. I thought it was really, really good. It was quite sad, but quite funny. Very naturalistic. Joaquin Phoenix is obviously one of the greatest of modern times, and well, in my opinion, anyway. Gwyneth Paltrow's in it, really great. Isabel Rossellini, obviously always great. It's just really good. I was, it felt like a film that had been like recovered from like the 40s or something, or the 50s. The way it was quite simple, very specific frames, lighting. Just kind of felt like I was watching a film that it felt a lot older than it was, and not in a bad way, in a good way. But
I get that.
And it was really good, very shadowy, dark. Would recommend it if anyone wants to feel sad. For a night.
We don't need help on that.
It's not particularly a very happy film, that's for sure. But it is funny actually. It can be funny as well. It's not all just doom and gloom.
We're not living in a time for movies that make us feel sad. Life just does that, is it?
That's what November's for, though. I think watching films that make you sad.
It is.
It's a good autumn film. It's a good autumn film. Anyway, go on.
So Andrew, you got anything to close us out?
I've recently seen Pearl, which is the prequel to X, starring Mia Goth. Another banger, another great Mia Goth performance. Much like X, you might say you've seen it all before. Like, if you've seen stuff like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all that exploitation stuff, you might say, if you watch X, you might say, I've kind of seen this. And what's it really bringing to the table that's new or different? And the answer is, well, it's bringing Mia Goth's performance, and it's bringing incredible production design and attention to detail, and everything's just really polished and has obviously been given great care in its craft work. And the same is true for Pearl. It's more of a psycho thriller than an exploitation movie this time. It's a story of Pearl from X, but when she was younger. It's in 1919. And it's the story of one girl and her axe. And because it's in 1919, there's a lot of like Spanish flu commentary, and there's a lot of don't go out without your mask on. You might get into trouble, and you're probably better off thinking more about where the axe is than where your mask is. But that's Pearl. It's like I say, in terms of the plot, it's pretty straightforward. But Mia Goth elevates it. The production design elevates it. The loving care given by the director elevates it. So go check it out. When it arrives in the
I don't know how Ty West has suddenly become good with these two films, because he was so awful. He used to be so bad.
Well, I kind of like House of the Devil, and I like The Innkeepers, but both these movies are better than either of those. And
easily.
And they go together. They elevate each other by going together. So it's really exciting to me that we will have the ability to have Pearl, X, and Maxine triple bill all-nighters at some point, because based on the first two installments, they really tie together and lift each other up. So good news.
And the thing that really ties them together that I like is they both show a love of cinema in different ways, because obviously X has got the 70s porn thing, whereas Pearl has got kind of silent vaudeville cinema as its sort of hook.
Absolutely. I also saw Athena on Netflix. That's a story about a kind of inner city riot off the back of a child dying, apparently at the hands of the police. And so the locals rise up and it just becomes all-out warfare between inhabitants of a housing estate and the police. And through the TV, we see that the same is happening all over France. So France is descending into civil war, but it's shot as a series of one takes. So you get these long one take sequences, then a cut, then another long take, etc., which makes the whole thing really immersive. If you're being negative, you could say it makes the whole thing feel like a series of interactive video game cutscenes. But I thought it mostly worked. The first 10 minutes leading up to the opening credits are all one take, and that is the best sequence in the film. So it's kind of diminishing returns from then on. But it is a great movie. Some people really hated the coda scene, which I won't spoil here. But there are people I know who really love this movie, and then there's the final scene at the end, and they're like, I feel so betrayed. I hate this movie now. 1 star. I was down with it. So, it's that final scene was a provocation to some for sure. But if you want to know what it is, you'll have to watch it.
Have you seen, Andrew, have you seen Our Day Will Come? Roman Gavras's, but his previous...
I have not seen it. I have not seen it, no.
It's so good. It's just like tough.
I will,
it's really good.
I will check that out for sure, because I really like this one. I've seen Guillermo del Toro's Cabin of Curiosities we mentioned. My favourites were The Outside, which is the Anna Lily Amirpour one about the woman who becomes addicted to lotion she buys from cable TV, which is kind of like... Oh, Dan Stevens and that doing a kind of Dutch Matt Berry.
Yes.
But the gloop in that is like the stuff. The way she talks to her TV is like Videodrome. There's a lot going on. I really like that film. And what else? The Viewing, which is the Panos Cosmatos one, which is the guy who directed Mandy. I like that as well. That one won't be for everyone, but it's so beautiful. And I found the ending pretty funny. What else? I rewatched Possession at the BFI with an intro by Kayla Janice, who wrote House of Psychotic Women. Possession is still a banger to this day. Recommended if you've never seen it. And finally, last night I watched a Korean film, which is not out in the UK yet, hopefully coming to the UK at some point, maybe in the new year. But it's called Project Wolf Hunting. And this film is like Barbarian in a sense that you might be better off going in cold. So I'm going to be very cautious here in my description. But it's a little bit like Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn, in that at the halfway point, it switches genres. So the first half is kind of like Con Air on a cargo ship. The plot is that the Koreans have come to an agreement with the Philippines to extradite a bunch of Korean criminals who had fled to the Philippines to escape the law. And so they're now bringing them all back, but they're bringing them back for some reason on a cargo ship. That's explained by the first scene in which they try and bring some people back on a commercial airplane, and then there's a suicide bombing at the airport. And they're like, we can't do that again. So the obvious solution is to put them all on a cargo ship. So you've got Con Air on a cargo ship, all these prisoners, all in their bright orange jumpsuits, all chained up, all kind of being threatening and sarcastic towards prison guards on the cargo ship. It's being monitored by home base back in Korea, and you're just like, something's going to go wrong. They're going to Con Air this shit. I know it. True enough, this isn't a great spoiler because you can see it coming. One of them's got a lockpick hidden in his cheek, and where's this going to go? Things escalate as you might expect. There's blood, there's gore, there's violence, and then halfway through, it's a 2-hour movie, so pretty much exactly on the 1 hour mark, bang, it completely changes genres, and for the rest of the movie, you're just like, what the fuck is happening? So if that sounds like your kind of deal, I recommend it. Do not, under any circumstances, try and find out anything about the second half of the film before you see it.
Sold.
That is called Project Wolf Hunting.
Watch listed.
Right, so I think that wraps us for this week. In the next episode, it will be part 2 of Stanley Kubrick, in which we'll be talking about his highest profile, I guess, would be movies in The Shining and 2001: A Space Odyssey. So, Oliver, where can we find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Oliver T. Parker, and I'm on Letterboxd as well. I can't remember what my username is on that, but the link to my Letterboxd is in my Twitter account, so both there.
Yes. Cliff?
Devil Times 5 Horror Podcast. Once a month. Just talk a load of horror and stupid shit.
Don't undersell yourself.
No. Stupid shit is part of the appeal.
Okay.
Part of the attraction.
Andrew?
You can find me on Twitter for as long as Twitter doesn't fall to the Nazis at Whitlock and Pope. You can find me on Letterboxd at Andrew Pope, and you can find my blog at whitlockandpope.com.
And I've been your host, Rob, and you can find me online and keep up with the show at Uncut Robcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Mastodon, actually, for the matter. That's a new one. And thank you for listening to Directors Uncut.